Good morning. This is Thursday, January 25th, 2018. This is Ron. Welcome to Storytime. And I am covering part two of When or How Intelligence Works, When It Does by Herbert E. Meyer. And in the first section that I covered on Tuesday, Mr. Meyer went ahead and basically gave a little bit of history of the intelligence service, CIA, and since 1980, since the Reagan administration, and also covered basically how intelligence is collected, that you don't just go out and collect data and then sift through it hoping to find something. You ask yourself questions and then go out and look for answers to those questions. This section is going to cover what happens when the collection has been done. In other words, what the analysts do, and also about the failures of the intelligence community. When the collectors have done their work, when they've told the analysts what they want to know, the intelligence process shifts from gathering information to creating insight. It's the difference between shopping for food in the supermarket and actually cooking dinner. Insight is the product of knowledge, experience, and, above all, good judgment. You cannot say something insightful or even something intelligent on a subject or issue about which you don't know anything. So the most senior intelligence analysts must be among the world's most knowledgeable individuals in their fields of expertise: the Mideast, Russia, China, nuclear weapons, economic development, etc. And they must have that one elusive and unquantifiable skill that so often brings success in every venture: the ability to spot a pattern with the fewest possible facts, the ability to look at what's known and combine this with their own knowledge, experience, and good judgment to come up with a new idea or insight. This is a skill we see in great scientists, in great entrepreneurs, and in great intelligence chiefs like Bill Casey. Back in January, when U.S. intelligence chiefs released an unclassified version of the briefing they gave to President-elect Trump about Russian efforts to influence the November election, Americans learned a phrase that's unique to the world of intelligence: key judgment. It was a key judgment that Russia had hacked into John Podesta's email server, and a key judgment that Vladimir Putin preferred Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton. Since those key judgments understandably erupted into a nasty political brawl, let's take a moment to understand what a key judgment really is. Simply put, it's the conclusion reached by our most senior intelligence officials, based not only on the evidence they were able to collect, but also on the insights it enabled them to reach based on their knowledge and experience. A key judgment isn't the same as a jury verdict. A jury verdict is based solely on the evidence presented to it. In a murder trial, unless the prosecutors prove their point by can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty, you must vote for acquittal. But in a national intelligence estimate, you reach a key judgment by starting with the evidence, then combining it with your own knowledge and experience to reach a conclusion. Presumably, because key judgments go beyond evidence, an intelligence service must be trusted by policymakers to be effective. Policymakers may not always like what they're told, as when the obvious implication of a national intelligence estimate is that a favorite policy is heading for catastrophe. But if they trust the intelligence service, they will know that what they've been told is likely true. And this trust needs to be earned. This is how it was during the Reagan administration, because everyone, from the president on down, knew perfectly well that the intelligence official who not only read the final version of the estimate and signed off on it, but also played a major role in writing it, was the CIA director himself, Bill Casey. Like every other member of the cabinet, Bill Casey was a busy man. But to Casey, being in charge of our intelligence service meant more than merely being its top administrator and dealing with budgets and bureaucracies. It meant that he himself was our country's top intelligence analyst. When the final draft of an estimate landed on his desk, More precisely, when I walked it into his office and handed it to him, Casey would take the draft, pick up a pen and a yellow legal pad, and go through it word by word. Sometimes he made a change that clarified a sentence. Other times he asked a question that forced us to go back and rethink what we'd written. When that happened, we either changed the draft or asked to meet with Casey to try and persuade him that the original version was better. He would listen and then make the decision. All of us who work closely with Bill Casey, he insisted that everyone, including the CIA's most junior analysts, call him Bill, were astounded by the amount of time he devoted to getting the final draft of an estimate, or the final version of the President's daily brief, just right. He did this by sitting quietly in his office, reading, writing, and, something that so few officials in Washington, D.C. set aside the time to do, thinking. So why has our intelligence service suffered so many failures during the last decade or so, losing the trust of so many? Because it's been run by career bureaucrats and administrators who rose to the top by managing intelligence rather than actually doing it. That's like putting an airline executive with an MBA and a law degree into the cockpit of a jumbo jet. And like bureaucrats and administrators everywhere, our recent intelligence chiefs focused on structure rather than on people. Of course, all organizations, including intelligence services, need the proper structure. But especially in an intelligence service, good structure is worthless without the right people. In this case, world-class analysts who are deeply knowledgeable about the Mideast, China, Russia, terrorism, and all the rest. Make a list of our country's leading experts on these subjects. How many of them have held top-level jobs in our intelligence service during the last dozen or so years? How often have the leaders of our intelligence service reached out to these people to seek their advice? The correct answers are none and rarely. We are still in the early days of the Trump administration, but to borrow an overused Washington cliché, we should be cautiously optimistic about the future of our intelligence service. Neither Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats nor Director of Central Intelligence Mike Pompeo are professional bureaucrats. They've built their careers on substance rather than on management. Each of them has proven he can talk about the key issues that confront us with an impressive level of personal knowledge and insight. Each is capable of actually doing intelligence rather than merely overseeing it. This will require restoring the correct balance between collection and analysis. Obviously, collecting information is crucially important work. Collecting information through technology, satellites, intercepts, and so forth, is intense to the point of exhaustion. Collecting information through espionage is dangerous and sometimes fatal. All of us owe these collectors a huge debt of gratitude. What they need now is guidance from the top, a clear sense of what to look for, rather than just being told to sweep in whatever information they can in hopes it will prove useful. Turning this raw material into first-rate intelligence will require the active participation of our country's best geostrategic experts in think tanks, universities, corporations, and increasingly the blogosphere. Directors Coats and Pompeo should recruit the ones they can and be in close touch with the others. This doesn't mean agreeing with everything these experts say and write. It means listening to them and blending their information and insights with what's been gathered covertly in order to reach the clearest, most accurate conclusions about what's happening now and what's likely to happen in the future. Finally, Coats and Pompeo will need to do the one thing their recent predecessors didn't do, either because they didn't recognize the need to do it or didn't have the ability. They will need to set aside time, quite a bit of time, to sit quietly in their offices and think. Their objective must be to paint an accurate picture of what's going on in the world and of what's likely to happen in the future. If they can do this, President Trump and his national security team will have what they need to see America safely through today's global turbulence. Radar. And that's it. That's part 2 and the finish of How Intelligence Works When It Does by Herbert E. Meyer, who's founder and president of Storm King Press and served during the Reagan administration as special assistant to the director of Central Intelligence and vice chairman of the CIA's National Intelligence Council. And that is, again, from adapted from a speech delivered on February 15th, 2017 at Hillsdale College. And it is published in Imprimis, which is a publication of Hillsdale College. And it is the February 2017 issue, Volume 46, Number 2. Tomorrow, I will be doing my little Storytime Extra and providing some either information from some of my past life experiences or some perhaps socio-political opinions. And then on Saturday, I'm going to be reading from Imprimis, and it's an article by Christopher Caldwell, senior editor of the Weekly Standard, entitled How to Think About Vladimir Putin. So until tomorrow, thank you very much for joining me, and you have a great day.